Welcome back to Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And in this week, we've got Chris Harris. Now, Chris and I met through Boston Startup, which is an incredible association of startups in, you guessed, the Boston market. Now, Chris is an expert in sales strategy, and application. He's done work at Harvard in their sales programs, as well as working in large companies and startups. So I'm super eager to have him on the show. Sales is always a hot topic in the startup community. Chris, I'm sure you can intro yourself far better than I do.
Absolutely, Jerry. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, a little bit about me. So I've been in sales in a bunch of different capacities, from building sales team, running sales teams, individual contributors, you name it, strategic, like I said, you name it, for about 16, 17 years now. I've worked for startups. I've primarily lived in Boston, New York City, and Silicon Valley. So I've worked for a lot of startups. I'm very passionate about startups, which you'll see a little bit as I get through my background here. Worked with VCs, well-known like Andreessen Horowitz, Greylock, Sutter Hill, and those have been fantastic experiences, all the way up to managing some very, very large Fortune 500 companies, strategic teams, most notably Comcast. Also at Akamai, which is a fantastic local Boston company. We love Akamai. And then, of course, I work at Harvard. So I work under two fantastic lecturers at HBS in their entrepreneurship program. It's in the graduate school as well. An interesting fact, it's called ES 101, Entrepreneurial Sales 101 / sort of founder selling. And it's one of the fastest growing, if not maybe the fastest growing lecture in the business school, in the graduate school, which is really cool. And so I'm coming off of just running North America for a publicly traded cybersecurity company. And I started Boston Founders Forum, which is a community meant for founders. And what we do is we bring in amazing speakers. It could be a founder that sold their business for, a few $1 billion, over $1 billion. It could be founders that are actively managing their business. We have panels, fireside chats. We had a panel recently, Series A, D, E, and C founders. And our community are early stage founders. And so we try to support them by having really fun events and interviewing very, very unique folks. I'm very passionate about startups and growth, and I'm super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We share an important passion, I think. The startup and small business community is not only the economic engine for our country, it's also the why can't I speak today? The innovation engine for our country. And while a lot of us, especially in our community, of course, think about startups, I don't think they get the attention they deserve and just how important they are to the country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you see what happens with a lot of successful startups. The most successful ones are having a global impact very, very quick, right?
Exactly.
But they're fun. They're great. The founders who run them are fantastic to work with.
Oh, that's awesome. And I have a question. Just given the diversity of your background, selling in large companies, selling in startups, as well as teaching sales in an academic environment, that's a pretty broad experience. What are the differences? Two main questions. What are the differences between selling in a big company and a new one? Also, and this might be an unfair one, but what's the difference between academically teaching someone how to sell versus actually selling?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, okay, so we'll start off with differences between very large companies and startups. So the biggest difference between the large companies and startups, and I know you know this very well, is at the startups, the founders are having to do a lot of the selling, founder selling, right? There also isn't generally, there's not a lot of process established yet. Everyone is involved in helping to sell at the startup. There might not be clearly defined, like I said, processes or what's the picture perfect sales cycle and how do we navigate that? The content hasn't clearly been established as yet. So it's a little bit more about the wild, wild west. Now that can be super challenging, but it also can be super fun, right? That's the biggest difference. Whereas when you're at a big company, it's the tactical components of what you do and the strategic aspects of what you do are very, very important. There are lots of processes already established. They've generally and hopefully have figured out what works, what hasn't worked, right? And so you want to stick within those processes, and that allows you to focus much, much more on the actual sort of strategic ins and outs of selling. Whereas again, like tactically, how you open calls, how you navigate the actual meeting itself through the meeting, and then how you the things you do to get to that next meeting, then how you navigate that meeting. I always say I like to break everything into sections. You have sort of start to finish here, your sales cycle, and there are key milestones and stages that need to be met within that sales cycle. And each stage itself, you can break down and do the same thing. And what I try to do, and this is a big part about my methodology here, is try to break it down as much as possible, even in meetings. These are the key sections of how you run meetings. When you're at a big company, you have a lot of support. You have a lot of things already established. And so you can really, really focus on the art of selling, right? However, with startups, because it is a little bit more of the wild, wild west, if you're someone who likes to basically have a big impact, you sort of thrive in these environments, right? The entire company is behind you. There's positives. Now that can be a lot of responsibility, but when you have the entire company behind you, you can be super agile. You can be very, very creative. It allows you to be open. You're sort of shooting for the stars here. And that's, so it's a very different type. And so what I think is really important though, if you can find a way to simplify the processes and the really unique things that make strategic enterprise sales teams successful in a startup capacity, in a startup environment, while still being able to maintain that creativity and whatnot, that is where things can be really unique. Okay. So I think those are sort of the core differences from enterprise to startup.
Can I pause you there for just a quick second, and we'll put the academic question on hold? And if you disagree with what I'm going to say, that's okay. And I'm happy to have it out with you on this call. But I don't know that you will, but I just want to throw that out there. So I will go a step further than you did and say I think the founder or a co-founder has to do the sales initially. Totally. I don't think there's flex there, and I say that coming from a place where, if there's no sales process, if there's no idea of who your real ICP is, if there's no idea of even the real value your product or service brings yet, bringing a salesperson up is setting everyone up to fail. But if the founder or somebody on the founding team is doing the selling and figuring those steps out and bringing the magic dust of being a founder to the table to help create that dissonance shield that gives them a little bit of extra wiggle room that Joey, the sales dude, isn't going to have, then they can figure that out, start to figure what sales systems and processes work for their use case. And once they've got at least broad strokes, if they loathe selling or just don't have game, then they can bring in a salesperson and have not only a better idea of what type of salesperson will work in that particular sales cycle, sales cadence, and sales process, but also know what that is to be able to make that choice.
You nailed it. I 100% agree.
End the call. We're going out on a high.
I 100% agree. Founders need to be selling. Not to mention, the founders know the product the best.
Yes.
And every single meeting and opportunity you have as a startup needs to be treated as it's incredibly important, because that can make or break a lot of things. So I couldn't agree more. I work with a lot of startups, and I'm working with the founders, and some of them get it and are excited, and others are nervous. But most of the work I do with startups is helping the founders themselves sort of teach the basic frameworks of sales. And what always is super fun is you have a founder who's not a seller, not familiar with sales, and they love it and they're eager to learn. And next thing you know, as their company progresses, people might refer to them as they're a real sales focused CEO or a sales focused founder. Little did they know, they never were. And you see, I have this gentleman. He was actually one of my students at HBS, and he's starting a company, very, very early stages. He's an engineering background, but he took the entrepreneurial sales 101 course very seriously, and he's fantastic at it, right? And he loves it, and he's going to make that a big part of his business. And so that's always super fun.
Quick related story. So this is a bit of a dated one going back about 10-ish years. So my company, Destination Employer, helps companies to grow the people side of their business. But prior to this, I owned a company called Influence Understood and really focused on sales recruiter and sales management training for companies. And one of my very first clients was, he called himself a startup founder, but his company was already over 5 million in revenue. He was the only salesperson in the company. And when he hired me, he's like, I'm ready to hire my first salesperson. I'm a horrible salesperson. I don't know how to sell. So I need help. I'm like, dude, you built a $5 million company. You did all the sales. You're not too horrible.
Right.
So let's take that off. So I want to fast forward to now. That $5 million company is revenues closer to 100 million now.
Wow.
And he's still the primary sales guy, and he still can't sell. So it's kind of funny how founders have that weird view sometimes.
It's hilarious, right? And it's very apparent. It's fun.
So awesome. So let's circle back to our question if we could. So, and you touch on a little bit, when you're teaching sales at Harvard, have you had anyone yet who's gone through your program and then talked to you after about their real life experience in academic versus for realsies or not yet?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great way to answer the question, and then hear firsthand after they've gone through the program what they're coming back. So as we all know, it can feel like drinking from the fire hose, right? Yes. Except for some of those people, I'll just do a little like side note here, who are naturally very curious and really good at listening and asking questions. Those are naturals. And like people always say, if they hear someone who talks a lot and whatnot, you must be a good salesperson. It's like, actually, no, it's the listeners. It's the people who ask questions are the best. But here's the big difference. So you see all these different sales methodologies out there: Sandler, Spin, Challenger Sale book on different things, and then Medic.
I have all three of those on my shelf.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You have all these different strategies, right? And teach it. I mean, at HBS, we incorporate like parts of all of them to teach, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And so what happens is they get parts of it, but unless they're doing it like for years and getting all the at bats and everything, because that's when you learn the most, right? It's those uncomfortable moments where you mess up that you become ingrained, and that's where you learn, right? That they did a study on the people who could speak like 5 different languages, and none of them were there's always super geniuses, but none of them were all super geniuses. It was the fact that all of them moved to countries and immersed themselves in it. And so whenever they felt embarrassed by saying the wrong thing, that's where you learn. So you have to have all those trial by error. And so how do you bridge that gap, right? Because when you're in a startup, you don't have time to mess up on all these meetings. And so when they come back, it's like, I remember kind of how we opened the call, and maybe some Sandler, like an upfront contract. And then I ask some questions, but naturally what always ends up happening is they hear something that their product solves for, and they jump right in to talking about their product, right? And that's how it always goes. And so I think what's most important, and the folks who've come back to me now, they came back and we talked about it, because what I always try to do is I was like, okay, this isn't I don't necessarily want this broadcasted, but all of these things that are being taught to you in each lecture, right? All of these things, throw most of it out. Let's put together some frameworks that you can maintain and see actionable results on, and then you can grow it. And so I think what I've been doing, and this is interesting because this is a part of the new course and program I've created, is I try to teach it in a different way. And that is, you have your average sales cycle. Let's just say, you're prospecting, you have your first meeting, discovery meeting. You might have one or two of those discovery type meetings. Then maybe it's a demo meeting or a product demonstration, right? And there's a series of like 3 or 4 that every business is different, but generally you have these 1 to 5 types of meetings in most sales cycles. There's a lot of other variables there, but to at least get started, right? For someone new, that's what you can kind of absorb. And so what I teach is, okay, this is the preparation you want to do before you have that meeting. All right, meeting starts. Here's how you do the rapport. Okay, here's how you do some upfront contracts and set the stage, set expectation. Okay, then here's how we break into our questions, right? We have open-ended questions, right? These questions, pain probing questions, things like that. Little cheat sheets. So I build like these cheat sheets and templates so that they can customize it to their business and offering. And big reminders, don't go into your product when you hear something it solves for. And there's the next set of questions, like qualification questions, right? It might be great. Do they have budget? I like to follow BANT when keeping it simple for new founders. Budget, authority, who's making the decisions, timelines, needs, you name it, right? And then how you then demonstrate your product based on what you learned and how you close the call. And so what I try to do is take these basic meeting structure, and within the training that, we're doing and I'm doing here, you still have your spin, you still have your BANT and MEDIC and Sandler and all these things, but it's in really simple frameworks, how you run the meeting, right? How you run each meeting. And when you do it like that, I find people, first of all, they don't get as nervous and uptight because they can have really easy cheat sheets that allow them to prep and see it, and it simplifies it. And then they're more eager to just go, right? And they're more eager to learn and ask questions and not fall into that trap. So when you can, I guess the moral of the long-winded answer here, the moral of the story is, if you could just break it into sort of sections and key frameworks, how you open a call, how you close a call, the questions you ask in between, things like that to simplify, that is the folks who come back. That is what works the best. Because even myself, I've been doing this. I'm very passionate about it. Am I applying every single thing from all, the different seminars, courses, books, and everything? No, you're not, right? And so that's like the big difference. That's like the big, big difference, especially with like sales folks in startups, founders selling.
So you said a lot there that I want to unpack. One of the chief things was the framework piece. I use the same strategy in my own programs and my own consulting. I focus almost exclusively on the startup and early stage business world. And the last thing a busy founder needs is a 20-page tome on how to do something.
Right.
They need something simple that they can apply, not because they're not intelligent people, but because they've got 350 things to get done that day.
Right.
And expecting them to memorize another complicated process is just unrealistic. Heck, it's part of the reason why the startup community values generalists over specialists, because they need that mental flexibility. This is no different. So I love the framework concept. That's huge. The other thing you mentioned about it was discovery. If there's one consistent error I see in newer salespeople and founders that are new to sales, it's misunderstanding and undervaluing discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So just like you said, they're so passionate about their solution, product, whatever. They're so excited that they just word vomit as soon as they're given the opportunity. They don't know what aspect of that product or service is of interest, would resolve their problem. But they also miss an important point. Discovery, of course, is to learn, what problems are to solve. But there's another more subtle part to that, and that's pain. The better job I do with discovery, the more I allow my prospect to wallow in their hurt for a little bit and really feel that pain, so that when I talk about a solution, it's that much more powerful.
Right.
And I think that's lost on again, newer salespeople and founders. So one last thing, and I'll turn the mic back over. I've read every single one of the books you just described. And I read at least one business book per month, and I have forever. And
Mm-hmm.
in the early stages of my career, I read a book, Challenger Sale, for example, which is probably my favorite and the ones you listed. And it was revelatory. But as I've advanced in my career, I discover that investment usually yields me one or two nuggets per book, and that's cool. But if I could give advice to early stage salespeople and founders new to sales, don't buy 5 books. Pick a methodology, dig into that and own it. Once you've got that down, now consider picking up other trainers.
You're so
But
right.
the worst thing you can do is fire hose it
You're
because you'll
so
retain
right.
nothing.
I couldn't agree more with that, right? And like that is basically the basis of the program I've just come up with. It's like, okay, I don't want you to worry about any of these specific things. We're just going to focus on in the module the discovery meeting and how you run a good discovery meeting. And so, you know what I mean? Then we break it into those frameworks. I don't want you to go memorize Sandler or Spin. It's just not going to work, like you said, for all those obvious reasons. I think you're absolutely right, because you also want to see progress. You want to get short-term wins, right? And you want to see what you're doing yield benefits and results. And it's just sales. It really does take time and to perfect the art of it so it comes naturally.
Yes.
Right. And so that's why you just have to simplify and you will see, especially the art of like discovery and questions. And even you don't even need to have great sales experience to open and end a call really well. You know, you open the call. This is the agenda we have today. These are the key things I'm looking for. Is that okay with you? We in mutual agreement, right? You end the call. I always say, no matter what, if it's a 30-minute call, 5 minutes before, if it's a 60-minute call, maybe 10, 12 minutes before the end. And that is, all right, you know, we're thanks. We're coming to the end. I get some feedback, mutually agreed next steps. Like you don't have to have sales experience to just know how to do those things really right. First impressions are everything. So I think you absolutely nailed it on this.
Another interesting thing for the new salesperson is the evolution they go through. You mentioned internalizing it and mastering it. It really made me chuckle. So I'm a fan of scripts if the people you're working with are committed enough to truly internalize them. So I could literally cold right now use the script that I sold staffing services in the late 90s and early 2000s with, because I've said it so many times I can do it cold right now and it will sound natural. But there's an evolution there. You go, the person goes from Robbie the robot, where they sound like they're reading off a page, they have no tempo, no flow. Then they go from there to what I call the radio broadcaster voice, where they've done it enough that they get that sing song. Hi, I'm Chris from Harvard, and you sound like you're on a radio. And then they finally get to the point where it sounds like just two people talking,
Right.
and then it's effective. But I want to dial back. So I've been doing this. I started selling in the early 2000s. I started my career in the late 90s as a technical recruiter, moved over to technical sales in the early 2000s. And I will say this, the two biggest changes I've seen in the sales landscape. Now, again, I'm speaking about technology and B2B, so this might not be a universal truth. I suspect it is, but it might not be. So the two things. Number one is access. Back in the Stone Ages, the hard part was finding contact info. But once you got it, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10 people would meaningfully engage. In those days, if I did 125 cold calls in a day, I'd have 5 to 10 meaningful conversations a day. These days, that's a good month. The second thing is decision making. In those days, managers had decision-making authority up to a point. These days, it seems if you're buying more than a box of number 2 pencils, there's a committee of 37 people that are making that decision. So if somebody says they're the decision maker now, I just assume it's not true. They're gatekeeping. Because nobody is, unless you're the founder, nobody's the decision maker. And if you're funded, then it's probably also the VC that's on your board that's a part of that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I was laughing at that because you're right. Like, especially, I was the same thing. I saw the exact same thing. Like, I could do 100. I could spend like the day 100 to 150 cold outreach, And we could get, like, I remember it. I remember being in the bullpen with, me and 20 other BDRs, and we're just hammering the phones and doing emails. And we had days because we had the leaderboard. Man, I actually miss those days, like this
I
old
do
total
too. I do too.
leaderboard. Yeah, I miss it. But we'd have days where we'd see like 10 conversations, multiple people having them,
Yeah.
right? 5 to 10. And I laugh because you're right. Like, that is a good month now. And with the proliferation, like with the power of AI and all of these tools, people are just getting smothered and smothered and smothered. And so the response rates on high value activity, anything outbound focused, it's just drastically decreased. And so I chuckled when you said that. You're right. And then the committee thing that I'm laughing again because so much of my course is like about that, like the different
Yeah.
stakeholders and who's your coach, because man, times have changed. I'm just like thinking about this now. And I think now more than ever, you have to have a solid plan, but it's committees for everything, to a fault
Yes.
in many situations.
Yeah, and it's such a different sales cycle. So back in the Stone Ages, I was talking to a director of IT. I could send that director of IT my agreement, and we're in business.
Right.
They might have to run it through legal, but that was the person who was going to sign the doc. Nowadays, there's no shot, and it doesn't even matter the value. I've sold single seats to my destination employer program, less than $1,000, and that person can't sign it. They can buy a ticket that costs them more than $1,000 on a plane, but they can't sign, for that without talking to a group. Then some of my consulting packages are over $100,000. And same thing, those I expect a committee, but there's always a committee involved. So let me ask you this, and if this is too much for the call, it's okay. But given the difference, so in the old days, getting the contact info was the hard thing. Engagement wasn't super hard. Now, in my experience, again, might not be universal, getting the contact info, a trained monkey can do that. There's 3,000 tools out there that will get you that. But getting that first touch, getting someone to have a meaningful engagement is the hard part. Do you tackle that part in your course?
Yes, it is hard. Like, it's
Yeah.
wild. That's why I was laughing at the last thing, because you made me remember we could have 20 BDRs and like 10 of them could land 10 new meetings and opportunities, like 100 in a day on a good day, right? And man, has that changed. So I see it everywhere. It's changing. And again, it's because of all those tools and the functionality.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing, yes. So first of all, yes, that's in the course. And
good, because it needs to be.
It needs to be. It needs to be. You have to. So first, like I'll think broadly speaking, as if I'm talking to a founder right now. You do always want to have, it's for marketing purposes, overall sales purposes, even if it's passive, outbound sequences going at scale. Because at the end of the day, it's a timing game. So you want to be there when someone's ready to respond. You want to be there. So you don't want to cancel that. You don't want to spam either. So you got to do it carefully. You want to be giving value. If we want, like, a really great way to do it is go to LinkedIn. Don't message them and be that person. Connect with them and start producing really valuable content that they see, and educate them and do it later. Like, that's a creative idea. So to that point, we have to leverage lots of different channels. And folks, this is going to be manual. Now, there's some really cool AI platforms that are helping to allow you to do this. But now more than ever, we have to be personalized.
Yes.
And so
yes,
right. There's a really fantastic founder and business out there that we use at HBS. We come and have him speak. Of course, the name is slipping right now, but he has put together the Agoji sequence, super popular. It's really good. I have my own sort of spin on that. The bottom line is, okay, we have to go through maybe 20 touch points over X amount of time. What does that look like? Email, phone, some sort of social interaction, right? Then in 3 days, again, a level, let's just go across those three categories. A combination of phone, email, and social outreach. And there's formulas that you can play, and you have to go into both. And then it has to be really personalized. Like, I don't think that one of the unique parts about all the technology today and social media is you do have a lot more information into, I say this, it might be a fault to get to people's personal lives, but at least what they're proud of. People love to promote what they do. That's why like talk about it and talk about their success. So that's an important way to go about it. You have more easier access to find what people care about, what they're proud of. If you're reaching out to executives, maybe they're on a podcast and you can see it, right? Maybe they spoke at a show, all the way down to just pulling out specific things on their LinkedIn. You can see what they're liking on LinkedIn, what they're commenting on. You can learn a lot about that. So learn about them, do all these touch points, but be personalized, be real, be
Yes.
genuinely curious, and just give it a break with all these different, like, sort of these standard messages you have. Just go back to being really real. One of the things I always talk about as to help people when in meetings and what asking questions is be like a sales therapist. Tell me more about that. Why do you think that's happening, right? Like, if you are genuinely curious about them and you approach that to the preparation that you do when trying to do outreach, yes, it's going to take longer, but you have to be personalized and you can't fake being personalized.
Yes, I love AI for ideation, for outlining, and for automation. But oh my gosh, there's nothing that's a bigger turnoff to me than getting a LinkedIn message or an email that very clearly is not a human because the language isn't quite right.
I can't anymore with it.
Yeah, especially if you're a social media or digital marketing company.
Yes.
You want me to give you my dollars to help you market my company and you hand me this garbage. There is a 0% chance we're moving forward.
It's almost like negative. It's negative.
There's no almost.
It's it's negative points. It's not just, oh, whatever, I'm not reaching out. It's, I will remember you as someone I never want to talk to. You know,
100%.
like,
I will wipe the person's name out, but I sometimes make fun of them on LinkedIn for that, especially if they're a marketing company. Additionally, if you're using an email sequence as part of your outreach, which of course you should, if it develops a passive aggressive flavor to it. Hey, Chris, I'm just bumping this up. I noticed you haven't responded. I guess you don't want to make money. Well, guess who's in the spam folder, brother? It's
yeah,
you.
I know, I know, exactly. I couldn't agree more. We're agreeing on a lot today, and it sounds like we've experienced a lot of the same pain.
Exactly. It's an interesting thing about sales. You know, I often tell people from a skill set perspective, a salesperson and a con man are the same thing. The differentiator is integrity. A salesperson believes in their solution and legitimately believes it'll help the people it's designed for. A con man doesn't care. They're just there for the dollar.
Right.
But as a salesperson, use the word therapist. It's not a poor choice of word selection because if you, again, and this is part of the reason why founders have a secret power in sales, there is nobody more passionate about their product than they are. When they reach out to that person and that person can hear the authenticity in their voice, and it's clear those questions are coming from a legitimate place of desiring to help, the sales part almost takes care of itself if you make sure you follow a framework and you're closing on the steps you need to.
Yeah, people buy from people.
Yes.
Buy from people, right? And if you are real and you're genuinely curious and you do exactly what you said, and yes, of course, if you you want to follow frameworks so that you can increase your conversion rate, right?
Yes.
But even besides that, if you are genuine and real and you listen and you're curious, you really want to learn, you know, at the end of the day, they don't care about you. They care about fixing something, or they care about finding value. So if you can help them do that, right? If you can help them do that and you are authentic in that, then you're going to differentiate and stand out.
Yeah, we could talk about sales specifics, I sense, for hours. But there's a piece here you mentioned that's super important. You know, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care about their outcome. So as a founder, there is a piece of kryptonite you have to be careful about. You're so passionate about your thing that sometimes that can come across as overbearing. So taking the time to ask the questions to ensure that there is a need, ensure that you really are a good solution, ensure that your budget, the budget makes sense for your price points, doing all that stuff up front. as you go on, and ideally this continues throughout the relationship, and they see that what you're expressing is legitimate, then they will care about you and about your outcome. And that's how you wind up with long-term clients. And that's how you wind up in a situation where you get referral opportunities, where, if your company makes a mistake, which happens, you're given a shot to fix the problem. And if you rise to that occasion, not only does your relationship survive, it increases because that person saw you go out of your way to resolve a problem. So I think that's a huge piece to keep in mind.
You nailed that one again. Like that right there. Because, like, first of all, what are some of the biggest problems people aren't always talking about? Churn.
Right.
What are some of the easiest ways to increase revenue through upsells? And
Yes.
what you are talking about absolutely impacts both of those measurables.
100%. And churn is huge because it's easier to fill buckets than it is colanders. The other part, referrals, that's always going to be the best path into a new company. And one of the, I mentioned the hardest thing that I've seen, or the biggest change, has been the difficulty to create engagement. So the tool I use, very similar to what you described, I call it push marketing, where I create an enormous amount of content, this show, my YouTube channel. I post daily on LinkedIn with, meaningful things meant to add value to my market. And then I engage with the people who engage with that content. And then there's people that I've identified as likely beneficiaries of my service. So I engage with their content. And that's the pull part. But the other thing that I look for that I think's often overlooked is if I identify that, hey, Chris Harris is in just the right size company for me, I think that there's value there. I look at who you know. And is there anybody I know that you know that can give me a meaningful introduction? And that's another, way in to help get past that difficulty in creating engagement.
Okay, so I'm working with a company now. They're not a startup. They've been around for 10 years, but they've plateaued. Mm-hmm. And they've plateaued at like just under 5. They want to get to 10 plus. And they've watched one of their competitors start to really grow. And they truly believe their product is better. And I've done an analysis, and I believe their product is equal to or better. So what's going on here, right? And one of the things that I have been stressing with them, because they, of course, want to do all these emails and outbound and all of that. And what I'm trying to say is, guys, you've been around for a long time. They work in ed tech. You work with thousands of schools. Most of what we do should be going to our schools that are happy. Principals know principals. Like, they know each other. School, get your referrals. Go do, send coffee, send donuts for the teachers, whatever you want. Do something nice, engage with them, talk to them. Referrals. That is like the most important thing, because just like you said, the power of a referral, credibility, trust, maybe a little bit of FOMO if they found out, well, their school is using this or that company's already using it, right? Like they get you from, so if we're going to start to finish, that referral can get you like halfway there sometimes. You know what I mean? And it helps. The biggest thing, it differentiates you. It's your competitive advantage.
Yes.
I can't stress enough how not just the concept of referrals, but having a strategic go-to-market referral-based plan, right? That is so important. That is so important.
And I'll add to that, and I'll talk about, I don't want to use that company specifically. That would be probably not great. But one of the things I've seen when a company plateaus, in my experience, a company rises to the level of its leadership. So that can mean a lot of things. They might be at the limit, and I'm not saying this is the case here, but they might be at the limit of their skill set. They might be, just out of ideas. And when they are smart enough to go to an outside person like yourself and bring in those new ideas, it elevates the thinking of the leadership, and the org follows.
Yes.
I think that's a huge value add when a stuck company has the wisdom to do that.
Yeah, I think, and even if you might not even be stuck, but maybe you want to accelerate. Like, there are tons of resources, like folks like us and people out there that are experts in things, right? Like I can't stress this enough. The importance of bringing in an expert. And look, you might have to pay a lot for that expert. But if that expert is 5xing your business, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5xing your business, that is significant. I forget the book, but I was reading, and this person said, I always invest in the best people I can. And he gave an example of bringing in this financial consultant, and it was the most expensive one of all of them he elevated. And right away, within the first 6 months, that person saved them $1 million in their business. And it was like, okay, like massive ROI. They would have paid triple for the most expensive person. It's so important, fresh ideas. And these people oftentimes have built an entire career around that particular area. And as a business owner and a founder, you are focused on your business, and as you should be. And so sometimes, yes, it's important to take a step back, but do even more than that. Don't have someone with you who can take that step back, but then has years of successful experience, so much so that they're an expert in it. And you can see that because they are surviving, running a business, thriving as a result of that. You want to bring those resources in. It makes so much sense. And that is even from a consumer perspective. You hear it all the time. If like paying for a coach, right? It seems expensive, but all the people I know who do it with these great coaches, their lives have been amplified. Same with a business, everything. So I'm just a big believer in that. I do it personally.
100%. Yes, so do I. Having accountability partners, belonging to communities. That's why I love your founders group here in Boston. It's so, I said it earlier, I'm going to say it again. The organization stops at the level the leadership is at. Mm-hmm. There's no sin in reaching your peak. There is a sin if you sit there and let your company wither because of it.
Right. Yeah, so I'll even go back to that company I was talking about before. The founder is just fantastic to recognize that we need to do something different. We're doing a big shift from a product-led focus model to a sales-focused model, bringing in the resources, taking it so seriously, like open to all these different ideas. One of the things I've really loved is the passion and focus on like testing it and getting into the nitty-gritty. So I have no doubt that this company is going to have some great success. And I think that's a great use case for all the folks who are listening, right? Be open to it and embrace it.
I couldn't agree more. Listen, Chris, I think this is a good place to stop. I'd love to have you on the show again. But before I end the way I normally do by asking where people can reach you, I'd like to hear just a little bit more about your program. Because as somebody who's passionate about the startup community, something targeted towards those folks, I think, is 150% the most important thing I've talked about today.
Sure. So what I did with this program is we teach a bunch of things at HBS. But what I found is, like we talked about earlier, is how do you simplify this? And at the end of the day, how can you implement it right away? And so what I've put together is, you take the 5 most common types of meetings, right, that you see in sales cycles, and you break them down. And what we do is we teach how to work through those meetings, how to run through those meetings. And you have templates and cheat sheets and tools. So even if you don't have experience, you're still performing at a top-notch level. Right? So now you're improving yourself because getting reps in is the only way to do it, but you're not jeopardizing these initial opportunities in meetings. And so it's based on different stages, how the questions to ask, how to transition, and it's super simple and super easy. And what we do is we have our generic version that goes through these 5 most common types of meetings. And that can be for a consumer, a sales rep looking to really improve. Also be really great for founders, right? Because they're the ones who need to do this. And then what we do is we have some advanced packages. And that's where we come in and we say, now we're going to take this entire concept and we're going to customize it to your business, right? And then even better, call it advanced 2. If you stick with us and we work on this for 6 months, we'll go through active real role plays where we listen to all of these meetings, we record them, we build it out. We don't just customize it for the business. but we stick with it and we work together and we make it better and better and better. So those are the three different levels. It's brand new, inspired by what we're doing at HBS and everything else. And I think, judging by what's starting to happen, I'm pretty sure you folks listening to this, they may even hear about it from other folks other than myself. So I'm super excited about it.
That's awesome. And Chris, now it is where I normally wrap things up. Where can folks reach you? Where can they learn more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I think the best ways are going to be LinkedIn.
Yep.
LinkedIn for sure. I'll send you a link to my personal LinkedIn. We have the Boston Founders Forum on LinkedIn as well. And then you can also find me on socials. I'm not on TikTok yet, maybe in the future, but Instagram and X, and I'll be sure to give those my usernames there for those as well.
I've done my best to fall in love with X, but I just don't hate myself enough yet.
I know.
I've tried so hard
It's
and I
hard.
just can't.
There's also a lot of bots on there, man. That's the thing. Like,
For sure.
I hope, I don't know how Elon would feel if I said that, but his whole free speech thing is really doubling up on bots.
Yeah, it's interesting because he tried to use it to kill the sale in the beginning, and it's even more true now than it was. But here I am
It's
starting
worse.
again. Chris, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, you have to be on the show again.
Absolutely.
But between now and then, folks, as always, thanks for giving us a listen. Between now and next week, please continue to start great companies and build great products. Chris, thank you again for being on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I look forward to
You're
the next
welcome. Awesome. We're out.